moment because I can't come up with anything. So I thought I would just defer it to Jenna and we could have a regional moment with her daughter. 3 minutes.
Yeah, you need to tell me when. She's like just hanging out down here.
Nice. What's her name?
She's happy, so we're just gonna leave her.
Yay.
What's her name, Jenna?
Her name is Ainsley.
Ainsley, nice.
Love it.
Well, if you ever need a babysitter, you let me know.
Does that mean she's allowed an in-person SLRD meeting?
Absolutely.
Trying to sort out childcare.
Absolutely.
Of course.
I brought Ollie with me when he was 3 months old to WHA meetings. Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
And there's no way that baby could be more disruptive than Director Rainbow. So I'm with Ainsley's welcome.
Wait, he's not here to defend himself.
I'm totally aware of that. That was very fast work on Natalie's part, and you too, Jen, on getting the support letter done somewhere overnight on the geopark.
Oh yeah, Patricia did that, I think a couple days ago. She's super on top of things. They all are. All of our staff are incredible. Okay, it looks like our live streaming is good to go. So with that, at 9:03, I'll call this meeting to order. And I would like to take a moment to ask everybody to recognize and sit with this for a moment, that we are grieving with the Williams Lake communities over the discovery of 93 bodies and potentially more. And we are devastated to learn of that. And we commit to understanding and listening. And with that, I'll ask someone to approve the agenda. Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Wiebe. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. We're going to defer the regional moment of the Village of Pemberton. Is that correct, Director Richmond?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to 4.1 CAO verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing this morning.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move on to 4.2, the financial plan, and admit Suzanne LaFrance.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, we also have Marie-Lou Leblanc when we get to that portion of the presentation. So just for your awareness in advance, and Suzanne will prompt as to when it would be appropriate to admit her.
Okay, super.
Thank you.
Good morning, Director LaFrance. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Suzanne LaFrance, the Director of Finance, and we're going to go through the staff report for the 2022-2026 financial plan for the regional services. The BC assessment values for 2022 came out in January, the completed roll, and I did a little bit of a review on the notes for everybody. So in all, the total assessment change was 26.21% of an increase, and of that increase, 1.23% was all non-market change. And that the assessed value that accompanies that 1.23% is $395,000 million, sorry, 395,999,694 in assessment. That is basically brand new. And when you're dealing with non-market change, there's other situations other than new inventory that can affect non-market change. So zoning changes, also property class changes, and things like that. I gave the board information on inventory only because that seems to be the biggest change. There's smaller changes with zoning and the other non-market changes, and mostly it was inventory changes. So the next page of my page 2 of my notes shows each area's inventory change review. There's not a lot of opportunity to dig into each of these areas and see where the inventory change was, but you know, BC assessments do offer some information. It's just based on folio number, and so it takes a lot of time to dig into. But if any director wants specific information on their area's inventory, I can dig into that. You just have to send me a request. So these current budgets are still subject to change, and there is a couple of changes already that will be reflected in the next month's budget. So these will be brought back to the board in February as well as March, when they will be hopefully adopted. So looking at the requisitions now, the consolidated regional budget change is only about $1 for $1 million household so far. General government increased the most with a 29% increase in the actual requisition dollars. And then we had a decrease in planning. We had a new requisition for regional solid waste management, which I'll get into when we dig into that service. And the other ones remained flat to last year, no increases. These budgets also include the 3.9% CPI increase. Due to past board resolutions, the December change year over year is what is used to increase all of the salaries for SLRD, so for the board as well as the staff. Salaries also include any unfilled positions right now. So there's a few unfilled positions that were meant to be filled in 2021. And of course, phasing in the new positions. So some positions last year weren't there for the full year, and this year they're increased in the salaries expense because they're actually there for the full year. And the benefits expense is estimated to be a 5% increase, but last year there's a very, very small percent increase, and I anticipate that to be the same case in 2022 because less people are going to the doctors and dentists because of COVID. But we'll see what happens. And we always want to have a little bit of ability to meet any kind of increase. So a 5% increase is kind of my minimum increase for benefits a year. And like I mentioned, the 2021 forecasted amounts are going to change. We use these forecasted amounts to build the surplus deficit for the prior year as we need to for regional districts to keep all of the expenses and the revenues in silos. So we're still receiving revenues and we're still receiving invoices that we're pushing through, and I'll update the forecasted figures for next month. And we'll get into the general government budget. And I'll just hit the highlights first, and then we'll move to the actual budget page. But for now, we could stay on that page 3 of my notes. I think it's page 4 of the agenda. There's just the one cover page. And so in 2022, we're going to replace 2 of our fleet vehicles. We're reviewing options right now. We haven't gotten to which type of vehicles we're going to be purchasing, but the budget is $85,000 for the 2 vehicles. And this budget also includes estimated online payments. Right now, we don't have online payments. We just accept deposits through our Scotiabank for utility payments, but we're looking at possibilities for people to pay other fees online. And so we haven't had the capacity to dig into that, but that's still in the plan. We have the grant administrator position for finance, which wasn't filled last year, just due to not having the capacity to get the recruitment process going, really. And the information technology budget, so that would be the software and the hardware that we need to purchase, includes the Aggresso, which is Unit 4 now, fixes and upgrades still. That was moved from 2021 to 2022. And still includes the estimated asset management software purchase that most likely won't be until 2023 because of just the staff capacity we have. And that's the asset management software is $40,000 in the budget, but is recovered by a $20,000 community gas tax community works fund as per previous resolutions of the board. And we are replacing one server in 2022. So that shows up as a fixed asset cost of $35,000 estimated. So we're hoping to also develop a corporate asset management plan for the SLRD, and that's shown in the budget with a $50,000 FCM fixed asset management grant. So over this, it's only a $12,500 hit to the budget. We've also added some additional costs into the information technology budget for conferencing annual fees. So we're looking at different conferencing solutions right now. So there is a little plug for $6,000 a year for any kind of conferencing annual fees as well. It's not mentioned in these notes, but I just thought I'd mention it to you now. We've carried forward the unused recruitment and recreation fund from the surplus fund. So in 2021 and also in 2020, we had taken some surplus reserve fund, $82,000, based on the board resolution to use it for helping recruitment and retention. And that's still in the budget carried forward right now. The operational surplus reserve. So this is set this year to be at $307,000 at the end of 2022. And the recommended reserve guideline policy states $633,000 would be the targeted amount based on 2 months of operating. It's difficult to get a full year operating with general government because it does shift from year to year based on where our focus is. So I just did a rough estimate, and so basically it's $325,000 short based on our recommendations. We're not required to get it to the level at the guidance level from the policy, but just to let the board know that that's the level we have right now. And
Will you entertain a question?
Sure, yes.
Just to make sure that I'm following you, is that you're talking about we still have $80,000 left over from the $100,000 that we set aside for retention and recruitment? Okay. And that's still sitting there. It could still be used for that purpose.
Yes, it's just carried forward based on what was done in 2021.
Director LaFrance, Director Demare also has a question.
Sure, yes, sorry.
Thank
That's
you,
okay.
Chair Ford. Director LaFrance, I'm really pleased to see the online payment. That has been a boogaboo for areas that aren't close to Pemberton. And yeah, that's great. That's very positive. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll go to the next page, and it shows a summary of all the general government projects for the board. So this includes the employee handbook carry forward, the boundary expansion work, which is just potential for every year because we do need to do a lot of analysis when boundary expansions do happen. So there's 30,000 in case there's any municipal boundary expansions. We also have the upgrade and fix of Unit 4, the financial software, which the budget is $56,485. And like I mentioned, the replacement software, the corporate asset management plan, and I also mentioned the asset management software. the 50-year anniversary cost, I've carried that forward as 5,000, but the board may wish to just release those funds now. The 50th anniversary was 2018, I believe, and because of just different issues and as well as COVID, we haven't done much with that. So it's possible that those funds can just, that expense can be reduced to zero, and we have those extra $5,000. Did you have a question, Vivian?
Should we just do that? Could we just have a motion to do that at this
I
meeting?
believe so.
So I think that is a very stale item at this point and not necessarily appropriate for the years going forward. Motion to just let that go back into general revenue.
Okay, I see Director Mack. Are you seconding that motion?
Yes.
Director Clark, are you comfortable with making motions through the presentation, or do you want to save them to the end? You're okay with that now? Okay. And you have enough to work with on that?
Yes, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. And the staff internet cost is the next project in the list, and that is 100% funded by the COVID Restart Grant. So it has a zero net cost, and that's why I highlighted those in green, just to show, I still wanted to show the project cost, even though it doesn't actually hit the budget. Recruitment and retention funds I mentioned already. There's also the First Nations relationships expense that is from the relationship building reserve. So that's also a zero net cost, and that's $6,000 of an expense in revenue. We also have the cyber security audit in here and or staff training if there's still some funding available. I think we can find some free staff training on cybersecurity. I have a couple through our antivirus system, our supplier right now. They have free training, so I have Paul looking into that. Paul, the IT specialist. And we have the regional connectivity project from COVID Restart Grant, which we have at 41,000. We have the communications plan carried forward of 5,000. We have the community energy climate action plan of 30,000 and the climate adaptation assessment of 20,000. And those are both board strategic projects. And we have the asset retirement obligations contract assistance of 75,000. So this is a new project that I haven't brought forward to the board yet. And it's basically because with PSAB changes, the Public Sector Accounting Board, they're now requiring us to have asset retirement obligations as expenses, as kind of a additional expense to the books. So these additional expenses will be all of the requirements for our assets when we retire them. So they're actually contracted requirements that we have to now place a cost to and put an expense on our books for a liability on our books for these extra asset retirement obligations. And it's a large project in that what the auditors are going to do is look at the full project and how we based our decisions. So they have to try to find all of the asset retirement obligations and all of the unknowns about our assets, and then build estimations on what those obligation costs are. So it is quite a big project, and it's estimated to be $75,000 to $100,000 for contracted services, and it might take the full year to get completed. We'll also have some staff time obligations towards this project as well. We're a little bit behind with those obligations as well. I just want to mention we're going to have to push pretty quickly through it. And it's just due to staff capacity at the moment. Sal, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Is this a one-time, or is it yearly, or is it once every 5 years?
So this $75,000 will be one time. It's basically to set up our obligations, and it takes quite a bit of time and effort to do this. So it's basically, once this is set, any kind of new asset obligations we have to still deal with, but it won't be to this level. Like this is basically to set up the program, for lack of a better word.
Okay, thank you.
Director LaFrance, you're talking about things like, this is sort of the assessment of what assets we have. When they retire, this is what would be required of them, like a landfill. If we were to close a landfill, this is what it would cost us for the ongoing requirements of keeping that landfill. There's that, I don't know what it's called, but is that the assessment you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's all these obligations for our assets when they're retired, and they're usually contracted in some way. So we have to actually look at all of our land use contracts, like the Crown tenures, to make sure there's no obligations in there for when this finishes, if the service is to ever end, what we're obligated to do with those assets. Okay, and so we also have the Regional Trails Master Plan in here. There is a mix between staff time and actual contract work time. So $20,000 I put in the budget for staff time, and that's to get the ball rolling. And then I'm assuming that we'll have to hire some outside contract assistance for this plan as well. So there's $50,000 in the 2022 budget for that. And we have the online engagement tool using $16,500 of Restart grant. And the net cost is shown in this list. And then we have the 3rd annual Nuclear Fall leadership gathering carried forward as well. And any other questions on that list of projects from the board?
Director Rich Jones, go ahead.
The Regional Trails Master Plan that doesn't include Area AB or Lillooet, as far as I can tell, is that the same as the Sea to Sky Regional Trails Plan? And maybe can we change the name to reflect that? Or am I missing something?
This Regional Trails Master Plan was part of the board's strategic priorities. So I can change the wording if the board wishes to name it something else, but I think that this was discussed during the strategic board priorities.
Go ahead.
But it is the same as the Sea to Sky Trail project that we see referenced elsewhere, right?
It is not the Sea to Sky Trails, no.
It's not, okay.
I saw a hand from Director Stoner.
I just had a question about the replacement and where we were at in terms of electrification.
Oh,
And
I'm gonna have to get you to start over. You're very choppy right now, sorry.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I was just curious about the replacement vehicles and where we were at in considering electrification of our fleets. And if that
Yeah, we're definitely reviewing that option. The issue is we do need something that can go up to area A and B in the winter. So we're looking at all the different options, and we might try to get a hybrid. We're looking at, we haven't decided yet what vehicles, but we are weighing all of those options.
So then my question would be, does the 85,000 reflect the true cost of that hybrid or electrification might incur? Have we adjusted that value for the cost?
We don't know what the cost is at the moment, so this is just my estimate right now. And I prefer not to go over 85,000, but the cost of vehicles is changing quite dramatically due to the chip shortages and all the other issues. All right, we'll go right to the general government budget now, if that's all right with the board, and that's on page 15 of my package, I believe 16 of your package. And it's just the first information sheet that shows the assessment change and the split between each area. So currently the annual budget shows an estimated residential tax rate for 2022 of 4 cents per thousand of assessment. We'll go to the next page, which is the first page of the budget. And one day I'll get this budget to be a little bit less onerous to review, but when there's more capacity, of course. So yeah, this budget shows all the revenues and expenses and tries to balance all of those additional transfers from reserve for projects, which makes the budget a little bit onerous. I highlighted all of the strategic priorities within this budget in the color blue so the board can see, and I estimated some costs based on staff reports, and I realize that this is a lot of information for the board to review the actual budget sheets, but does anybody have any questions on these budget sheets? Vivian?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. We mentioned yesterday, I mean, I'm on page 14 of 41 of your report, and
Okay.
that's where, that's as far as I've gotten. Director Rainbow mentioned increasing the budget for the invasive species management and control yesterday, and I thought that was a very good idea.
Well, we can go to that budget next if you'd like.
Am I on the same page as you, Suzanne, or am I even keeping up here?
Oh, you're on page 14, which shows all of the regional budget information.
Right.
So we can go to regional invasive species. It's really a small budget. If we want to go to page 25 of your package or 24 of mine. Currently, there is no opportunity to increase this service because the bylaw states there is a dollar maximum of 75,000. So if we were to increase this budget, we would have to look at other funding options other than taxation. Did the board want to discuss increasing this budget further based on that information?
Go ahead, Director Richmond.
Was there a request by the society to increase their budget? I know we increased it a fair bit a few years ago, and they seem to be good with what they've got. So I'm not sure that we need to suggest increasing budgets when that request isn't being made, especially if we have to change the requisition. So I'm happy to leave it where it is, but my mind is open.
Yeah, that's correct. So they have requested 75,000 based on their work plan.
So what was that extra 30,000 that came up yesterday then?
That was me. Shall I go ahead and just answer that?
Yep, go ahead.
And actually, there were a couple of comments that I should have made. I think by then, with all that Zoom, I was fairly spaced yesterday. The Lillooet Regional Invasive Species Society is already actively involved with FLINRO and our First Nations partners on rehabilitation and restoration, particularly after the McKay fire. It's a massive project. And I'm just really pleased that Elris is participating because they have such a good grasp of the landscape, good connections, and I feel that they can do some very good work with these partners. That was the extra 30,000 for Elris specifically around that project. And yeah, and also we of course will ask for some reporting on that, and Elris is very good at reporting, as you will have seen from yesterday. But Jen, you also offered maybe a form from Whistler that we could send to them. And I thought I should have included that yesterday in the resolution, but I didn't. But let's still provide them with the form. And I'm fine with leaving this budget the way it is. If you're right, they're not asking for more. So there it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I'll just quickly revert back to the general government budget to see if there's any other questions or comments on that budget. And then we can go to land planning and zoning after that.
Can you give me a page number, please?
Well, we'll go to the general government budget, which starts on page 16 or 17 of the full package.
And I think Director Pettengill had a question.
Yeah, and I apologize if this isn't the right time to ask this, but going through this, the surplus deficit lines, the variances seemed reasonable. On the total expense lines and the total revenue lines, some of the variances of the 2021 forecast versus the budget seem to be significant. And I'm not familiar enough with SLRD budgets to know, is that sort of just typical? And as long as the surplus deficit line is, a smaller variance, that's okay? Or, is this COVID or just sort of want to understand some of that variance a little bit?
So yeah, most of that variance, I'm just looking at the revenues, total revenues. The 2021 projects that are being moved to 2022 will show that variance. So a lot of reserve funded projects, for example, the Seton Park, which is $300,000, is coming from reserve. So I have to show it out of the general government budget because we're siloed and these reserves are located in general government, even though they're going to be used in the community parks fund. So a lot of these variances are projects that haven't been completed in 2021 or carry forward into 2022. And it's hard to show the budget without all of these transfers, but that's my goal for next year, is to reduce those transfers from reserve. So it's just one line item and you could easily see, okay, this is the amount that was not transferred from reserve for projects. So these are those projects most likely still carry forward to the next year though. So that surplus is basically zero in 2021 because it's a transfer from reserve and a payment out to the cost center, which will just transfer into 2022. It's different with regional district budgets in that we have to keep everything siloed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to page 16, general government. Is that correct?
So yeah, we're still on general government and still open to any questions
I have a question.
on any specifics. Oh, Mike, hi.
Mike, then Sal?
With regards to the asset retirement obligations, and I'm sorry if you said it and I missed it, is there any possibility if the board wanted for offsetting grants or gas tax or anything like that that could offset the amount if we wanted?
Definitely not gas tax. I don't believe that would cover. They allow asset management plan work, but this isn't asset management planning. It's part of the public sector accounting board standards. So there's no option that we basically have to do this. But for grants, the board can look at the opportunities. I don't know of any grants right now for this project.
Okay, we'll go to Director Demare.
Yeah, thank you. Salaries. It's 22 budget, preliminary budget is $1,549,000. Sorry, $1,549,000. How many positions is that?
I don't have that number, but I can find it for you. And I might as well mention while we're on salaries that this salaries line does include another NDIT intern, but it's come to my attention that that will not happen for 2022. So we have a current NDI intern that will finish off her term, but we will not receive a new NDIT intern. So let's see how many positions this is.
And there's more work to be done on this line too, right, Director LaFrance, that we'll see in February.
Depending on the board's resolutions, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not privy to what happened yesterday, so.
What line number are we looking at now, Suzanne?
So let me just finish Sal's question and I'll get right to you, Tony. So basically there's 20 different positions in here, but some are just partial positions. So for the CAO, there's a little bit of carryover. So I counted 2 positions there. So, 19 positions, but some carryover with the CAO. And then there's senior project manager carryover where that senior project manager continued on for 4 weeks in 2022. So, and then there's also the local government intern and the regional business liaison that have partial salaries for 2022, but they're not continuing on for the full year. So it's a little tricky, but there's 20 positions plus any increment for acting at a management level. We're required to pay based on our oh my gosh, can't even think of what it's called right now, our employee handbook. We pay for additional costs for when a staff member has to act in a management position, and also for any kind of relocations and the relocations are in benefits costs. My apologies there. So basically, Sal, I don't know if that answers your question. There's 20 positions, but there's some that are very small amounts, just finishing off their term.
No, that answers it. Thank you.
And Tony, sorry, I'll go to you now.
I just find it very difficult to follow the conversation if I don't know what line I'm looking. If people could just quote the line number or the page, not just the page number, but the line number would really help.
Sorry, so this is on page 20 of the full agenda, and it's near the top, salaries line 50110.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
I think we can carry on. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks. Is everybody comfortable going through land planning and zoning now? Or does more discussion for general government?
I think we can move on.
Okay, so we'll go to land planning and zoning, which starts on page 26 of my package, 27 of the agenda. And this shows the requisition change and the apportionment change and the estimated tax rate. And the next page shows the full budget. So that's page 28 of the agenda, 27 of my package. And basically for the application fees, I averaged just the last 2 years. Things are changing so rapidly that I feel like going further back into the past to make an average might not be the best average. So I just used the last 2 years. And the interest on reserves are very low. I'm actually recovering that interest loss. So in the line item 43,000 transfer from other services. So it's one line item for all of the COVID restart grant usage, and that basically for 2021 it's 2,624. I'm recovering from the COVID restart grant for the interest losses. So does everybody see that portion? And that's for every service. every service that had an interest loss, I'm recovering it through the COVID Restart Grant, which is part of the allocations approved by the board. And so this cost center also includes an unfilled position that they're going to be using potentially a summer student or a contract worker to assist with project work if needed. And the overall budget has decreased, and they do have just slightly, their operational surplus reserve fund is just slightly below their reserve guidelines. So there's potential to increase that this year or just leave it as is. The difference is about $20,000. Does the board wish to look at increasing this reserve? I think, yeah, if the board wishes to, we can do that this year. I'll get the exact amount of the change.
Maybe you can bring that back with that change, or do you want to do it? That's fine.
It would be 21,955. And I'll just put that in really quickly to see the change in assessment. So it would be $6,000, 560 requisition over last year, but the tax rate will remain at 0.0067 for $1,000 of assessment. So it's still below last year's taxable tax rate. So I'll propose that into the next budget if the board requires that. Any other questions on land planning and zoning, Jenna? And Mike?
Thank you, Director LaFrance. I'm just curious why you're proposing that we increase the reserve for land use and planning, which is close to the policy suggestion, versus the general government reserve, which is like only 50% of the policy recommendation.
Yeah, the general government reserve, like I had mentioned when I was talking about the cost center, the scope, the operational plan changes so drastically depending on what projects are proposed for the year. So it's hard to get a set reserve, you know, my words are failing me, but it's just hard to estimate annually when it changes so drastically. So, you know, I do review it, and with the regional districts, we don't have, I don't know how to explain it, but these operational surplus reserves are for operations, right? So we're using these funds when needed, when there's emergency or incidental expenses over what we budgeted, but really they're not really necessary for us. I don't see any issues with current budget. You know, I don't see us having to use all of these funds. So to build up that reserve just to have it sit there, you know, I'm not sure if that's the best idea either.
I appreciate that, but then why would that be different for the land use and planning section of the budget?
It's not different. It's just land use and planning is more set with their operations. They don't change as much. So it's really easy to have an annual amount reviewed each year. So that
target is clearer for the land use and planning section than it is for the general government section.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And Mike, did you have your hand up too? Nope.
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
All right, so we'll go to the next budget, which is the Regional Solid Waste Management budget. And so I'm going back to the notes on page 5 of my package, which is page 6 of the full package. And so there is software tracking included in this budget for 2,500, which is a carry forward. There's zero waste educator contract fees of 15,500, which is annually happening already. So we have some the zero waste educator going into schools and discussing recycling and composting and things like that. And then we have a new project for a zero waste ambassador. So this is a $20,000 expense estimated for 2022, and that's to attend parks and events in the area to be an ambassador for zero waste. So that was a request by the UES staff. We also have zero waste initiatives for $2,000, which is just a carry forward, and it's been reduced from 5,000. We have the Area A diversion options for organics, which is a $10,000 project. And hi, Mary Lou. So Mary Lou is joining us. She's going to discuss any questions on specifics for the operational changes, as I don't have that information. And we have illegal dumping strategy project for 25,000. We have diversion campaign, which continues, which has been started, I believe, in 2020. And that diversion campaign is 25,000. We also have the WorkSafe BC coordinator again this year for 20,000. And we have a new solid waste emergency management plan added to the budget for 50,000. And Mary Lou can speak to that if the board wants some more information on what that project would contain.
Yes, I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. So the idea of the solid waste emergency management plan is following what we experienced last year with the flooding, with the fire. At some point, Whistler Waste wasn't able to move. And so we realized that within the regional district, and it's like the south is a little bit different than the north, we are actually, we don't know much. We don't have a roadmap of what to do if those things were to happen. And so basically we are more in a reacting, and we want to be more in a planning. We want to know more about what could be our options, what can be done to prevent some of that. And that's the idea of the solid waste emergency plan. The idea is to also to contract to hire a consultant to do that. We don't have that knowledge. We don't have the staff capacity to take on. Obviously, we will be supporting the consultant to do that. And my idea is to also look at grants. So the $50,000 is what I expect the full cost to be. But staff would be looking at grants and obviously, hopefully get some of that cost reduced if we were to move forward.
Okay, I see a question from Director Richmond, then Director Birch-Jones.
Thanks. That mostly answers my first question. And I was wondering if 50,000 seemed a little high for that study. So thank you for the information. Hopefully we can get some grant funding towards that. Just curious, what we have the ambassador and the zero waste educator seems a little redundant, or can you just tell me why the roles are separate, or give me a little more information on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the zero waste educator is the program we have that goes to school. We have a contract with Aware for that. So they visit all schools within the region. So they go to Lillooet, down to Squamish, in Pemberton, to the French schools as well. And they're educating kids. With the zero waste ambassador, what we want is, depending on the events that is happening, and obviously COVID kind of like hit us quite hard on that, but we're hoping to have youth outside being at events and like just talking to residents, visitors, to reduce the contamination, reduce the waste. Whistler has a great program on that. They go to parks, they go to events, and that's kind of what we're looking at, to kind of like copy that model and spread it towards the regional district. We are hoping that some staff will have some capacity to go to farmers market, but if we want to expand that, we don't have that staff capacity. And we all know that a face-to-face is way better than posting on Facebook or doing some ads, and really face-to-face is what is paying off. So that's what we're hoping, and that's why it's a little bit different. Hopefully I answer your question correctly.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Director Demare, then Director Stoner.
Thank you, Chair Ford. Mary Lou, as you know, we've got currently only have 3 students in our Goldberg school. So I'm wondering when the educator is doing something in Lillooet that notify our school, and they could do a road trip. They do a number of road trips a year to Lillooet for different events. And I'd like to see that, if that's possible.
Yeah, so we have been reaching out to all schools. They keep reaching out. And so they're really working to make a trip, like to be more efficient in their traveling time. So I haven't seen the list lately, but I'm pretty sure that they are going to Goldbridge, or they have been. And if not, I will reach out to where is the contractor, and just to make sure they emphasize that. But every school is being reached out. It's sometimes just like a staff capacity, like teachers' capacity to be able to receive those contractors. They also provided the option of doing it online. So they have 2 options, online or in person, just to be able to speak to the COVID situation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Stoner, and then Director Birch-Jones.
Thank you, through the chair. Ms. LeBlanc, appreciate the forward thinking of the solid waste emergency management planning project. However, when I look at the budget, there are a number of special projects that are being carried forward from 2021. I'm assuming that's largely a capacity issue. And so what makes us think that we'll be able to manage this contract and that work when we still have the illegal dumping strategy, consultation education that's being carried forward, the budget for Area A diversion options, and there's a few other in that list that are being carried forward. So just curious how we're going to get it all done.
Yeah, so obviously in 2021, we had a new staff member in a person of Vanessa Lafontaine in the communication role. So when you start a new role, it always takes a little while before you get really up to speed. So we're really looking to, for 2022, be able to get more done. I'm happy to say that illegal dumping strategy RFP is almost done. So we'll be able to have it out and posted soon, I'm hoping. So that will be something that will be done. And there's quite a few things that it's just being like an ongoing. So the White Save BC, Zero Waste Educator. So we have a good program going on. So as we move forward, it takes less of my time to manage that, because we kind of like get to that speed where everyone knows what they're doing. And it's just like a little bit of management overseeing the contract. So that's why I'm feeling quite confident with this year. And hopefully we can get it done. And for the solid waste emergency management plan, it will be like our team effort in the UES department. It's not just be like solid waste.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that you feel like the team is getting up to speed and in a bit more of a consistent working mode. My other question, and this might be for Director LaFrance, if I'm reading the budget correct, on page 31 of the agenda, the diversion campaign special project 108. As I read it, the 2021 anticipated budget was 20,000, but only less than 5,000 of that was spent, and we're putting another 25,000 towards it in 2022. And my question is that carryover or is that new taxation?
So it's a bit of both. It's a carryover project, but for the actual project costs, it's a little bit of an increase. So we're adding in, so there was about $5,000 spent, and we're just adding that back in for 2022's projects.
So we're increasing the budget from 20 to 25, and
Basically,
any
yeah.
of that is carryover.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to Director Birch Jones for questions.
Thank you. When you say all schools, Mary Lou, you don't mean any of the on-reserve schools, correct? Or do we offer these packages or outreach to on-reserve? And I'm not trying to make your life complicated. I'm just wondering, do we offer?
Yeah, we have been going to, and now I need to go back and try to remember, but at least for Lillooet Nation. That is what I know and I remember. I'll have to go back and look. Sometimes it's just when they don't receive responses from the school or the teachers. There's so much we can do, but we've been trying to work with our communities and solid waste counterpart to kind of like promote that program, to make sure we reach out to everyone.
That's wonderful. I have one other question, if I can, Chair Ford. The illegal dumping, I remember Alan McEwen from the Pemberton Wildlife Association coming and giving a presentation. It's at least a couple of years ago now. And that one is pretty dear to my heart. It's a very big problem in Area B as well. We had to pay for some cleanup with select funds last year, which I was happy to do. But am I hearing you have an RFP out for illegal dumping? So is that the first step on actually getting our program happening? And would that be regional? Thank you.
Marilee, did you get that question? You froze up there, so it's possible you, yeah. Vivian, can you repeat
Sorry,
that?
I did
Sorry.
not.
I thought it was my system failing. Just a plug for the illegal dumping and how important it is. And will the RFP, well, at least to prevent it or clean it up. I'm not in favor of illegal dumping. I just wondered, tell me again, you have an RFP out, so we're actually going to be doing something, and will that cover the whole region?
So the request for proposal is not ready yet to be posted. We are working on it, but we're getting closer. The idea is to hire a consultant to really understand what prevents people from disposing their materials properly. What are the barriers and how can we overcome them? So it's really a strategy and an action plan. And from that, we'll be able to kind of like address it. And yes, the idea is to cover the entire region.
Thank you for that. I think it's an old hand, but Director Richmond, do you still have a question or?
Old hand.
Okay, thank you. Director Stoner, go ahead.
Thanks. Just one more quick question that I noticed again on page 31, 50580 contracted services. The note says that there's an increase in 2022, but there actually isn't an increase in the budget. So I'm curious if that's an oversight or if it's a misplaced comment.
Very small increase of $500.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, sorry. It's a very small increase. It's just $500 over last year. Over last year's budget, sorry. Last year's budget was 15,000. The actual for 2021 came across at 15,500.
Okay,
So yeah,
got
just the increase in the budget, sorry.
thank you.
Okay. Where do we go from here, Director LaFrance?
All right, so I think that's it for solid waste management. Thank you so much, Mary Lou, for being a part of the call.
Yes.
We'll go to the UES department, which is the very easy budget. Basically, all of the UES staff charge out their time to the cost centers that they work at. And this time charge also includes a little bit of a rate for their training and travel to try to capture all of the expenses of the department. And if there's any overage or underage in a year, we reallocate that back out using the time allocation. So the surplus carry forward is zero this year, but we are reallocating about $30,000 back to the services. Just we had less expenses this year than I would say we budgeted for. And this service now includes the new project manager. So that previously was in general government. We had two project coordinators in general government. Now one is in general government and one is in utilities department. And it actually is a bit easier to budget this way as they 100% charge out to certain projects. And so obviously the project manager does work on just specific projects. So everything, that salary is now in this department, but it's 100% recovered through the time allocation to other services. So because of that increase in the staff component, the other expenses did increase a bit for training and for the staff retention. That's the staff health and wellness benefit. But the majority of everything stayed pretty standard. Does anybody have any questions on this specific budget for the department? All right.
Any hands?
Great. So we can go to the next budget, which is the Regional Transit Planning and Infrastructure Service. So this service is basically carrying forward the same projects from 2021 into 2022. And using the surplus reserve for, excuse me, the $50,000 project to move regional transit forward. Any questions on this budget? Seeing none,
Okay.
we can go to the next budget, which is the Regional Growth Strategy. So this budget will go to page 39 of the agenda package. And basically it's carrying forward a standard expense to 2022 for contracted services for any RGS monitoring requirements. There's a little bit of legal in case there's any RGS amendments needed. And there's also planning chargeback, so staff time allocation for planners working on regional growth strategy. There's also a carry forward for meeting costs, and of those meeting costs, there's $2,000 recovered if there's First Nations consultation from during these meetings. And these funds are from Squamish Nation. We received these funds many years ago for this purpose, for RGS meetings and consultation with First Nations. And we still keep this reserve, and we're still going to use it when there's consultation with the First Nations. Any questions on RGS?
Let's see, any hands. Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, great. And the final service is the Sea to Sky Trails. And that starts, basically the requisition remains flat to last year. So we'll go to page 41, and the budget starts on page 41 of the agenda package. And basically I work with the Trails coordinator to develop this budget. And most of the projects are carrying forward. There was new projects added with potential grants associated. So that project is the Sea to Sky Trail Gord's Garden to Nairn. So that's included in this budget at 363,000, but there is potential, if there's no grant applications that are approved for this, it won't be going forward. So in this budget shows a grant and an expense of 363,000. So the bottom of page 42 shows the specific projects for trails. And if the board just wants to review that, see if they have any questions. And next year, I'll attempt to have the Trails coordinator do that large spreadsheet again to show the progress for each section of the trail.
Director Rainbow, go ahead.
I just want to follow up on Vivian's question from earlier on. I'm looking at the assessments, and it's municipalities of Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton, and then just electoral areas C and D. So it really is Sea to Sky Trails. So my question would be, does our Trails and Parks coordinator have any responsibilities beyond Sea to Sky? You know, are we doing anything in the Lillooet Area B area? I mean, they are part of the regional district. It just seems odd to me that we have this whole budget and scheme and plan for just Sea to Sky.
Well, they do have other services. So there's the Pembina Valley Trails, there's Fur Creek open spaces, there's Britannia Beach Parks and open spaces, but it has to have a service in order for the staff to work on projects. So I don't believe there is a service around Lillooet for parks and trails, and that's why.
So Alison McDonald then would have no responsibilities in that area.
If there's no service area to work on, they wouldn't be working on it.
So Vivian, I guess we need to deal with that at EAD and see how to move forward with it.
Theo Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. I did just want to mention that there is on the list that has been approved for the board to be put onto staff work plans, an Area B Parks and Trails service establishment that is planned. And so that is something that will be coming forward and will be actioned at one point.
Director Richmond, go ahead.
Thanks. Just curious what the line item for $8,000 to accommodate flood protection around the Friendship Trail Bridge. I don't know if you know that, Susanna, if that's a question for Allison. It is line.
So I'm just looking for this line item in Sea to Sky Trails.
Yeah, 99996.
Yes. So this was a request this year for a new bridge due to flood protection issues. And this is a shared project with the Pembina Valley Diking District. Does that ring a bell? I don't have any other details besides that, unfortunately.
Okay. Must be a small bridge for $8,000.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a small bridge.
Okay, thanks.
Or a very large pothole on a bridge that exists.
Yeah, you haven't driven over the bridge over the Lillooet recently.
I have. It's tremendous. Any other questions? All right, back to you. Oh, Director Stoner, go ahead.
So I will hold until we're wrapping.
Sorry?
I just had a general comment, so I will hold it until wrapping.
Your sound is really terrible. Sorry. Okay, back to Director LaFrance.
All right, so I think that is the end of it all. So I'll just open up to any further questions or any kind of comments, anything at all from the board at this point.
This is something that has baffled me since I started with the SLRD board in 2018. It is such a large document and it is such a complex accounting, but you do an excellent job of explaining it. And it's taken me a couple of years to understand that today's our first view of certain sections of it. And then next month we'll see another iteration of it. And then the next month we'll see another iteration of it. So for the sake of people watching online, because I'm sure there are people with questions that I've had over the years, this is an iterative process that gives us snack size glimpses of what we're approving. And this is by no means the whole thing. This is not the whole picture. It's a triptych, if you will. So thank you. Questions? I saw Director Pettengill put his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to sort of dig into a little bit more of the question I asked earlier, just to make sure I'm understanding it. And so on page 24 of our package, the total expenses line for general government, our 2021 budget was just under 8 million, 7.964 million. Our forecast to the end of the year is 6 million. So that's a variance of 24%. And then for 2022, our budget is very similar. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, our budget in 2021 was off because we didn't have the capacity to do the work. That's the impacts of COVID. I'm just trying to understand if there's some sort of issue sort of implied by that we should be aware of, or that's just the way, that's sort of a normal sort of thing for these sorts of budgets. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that number.
Mm-hmm. It's really hard to just look at any kind of carry forward, but basically anything that was not spent in 2021 doesn't necessarily carry over to the budget, but a lot of these carryovers are specific project work. So they entail a revenue and expense already that merges to a zero net change. So that's why you don't see that dramatic shift in the 2022 budget for everything. We're not adding much more, if that makes any sense. We're just, a lot of the projects that weren't completed show up as, in that line, in that column for 2021 budget minus forecast. It shows up as a variance, but the full impact on the budget is zero because it's just a revenue and expense carried forward.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. But I guess if there is that variance, does that mean that we're taking on too much work or that we need more staff? Or I'm just trying to understand why there's that variance from what we budgeted.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. And it's a little bit of just projects that are using funding that haven't been funded yet. So for example, some of the Community Works Fund projects using the Community Works Fund reserve, I'm waiting for backup on the cost before I can send out the funding. So there's just a delay in getting the information needed to distribute the funding, as well as capacity to do some projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Stoner?
Thank you. I agree with Chair Ford that this is a challenging process, and Director LaFrance, you do a good job at trying to break it down. It still isn't actually very easy. I think this is my 3rd year doing it, and I'm still wrapping my head around it, but it is in manageable chunks. I think it's important to reiterate that this is an iterative process. One thing that I'm curious if it is possible to do, and I appreciate in your presentation a few times you said that you will be working on trying to present this in a different manner going forward. In particular, a piece that I have a hard time understanding is what is being carried forward versus what is new projects. And so I don't know if it's possible to like highlight the carry forward work in the budget items. And if that's not possible, and even just in the summary on page 5 of our agenda, you did it in some line items, but it's not consistent. So some of the 2022 budget is showing the net cost, and then other items are showing the total cost, and then it's just highlighted as 0 net cost in the summary. So either breaking that high level table out or highlighting it in the actual budget line items, whichever is easier for you, but it would be very helpful for me reading the budget to understand what is carry forward project versus new additions to the 22 budget, if that isn't too much of an ask.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. And my plan basically was, especially with the transfers from reserve, just to keep that as at least not one line item, but at least based on each type of reserve, instead of having each project separated. I don't think I'll be able to do it this year, given the staff capacity, and I'm the only one doing these budgets. But for next year, I definitely want to increase the readability of these budgets, basically. I understand that it's quite complex, but this is how I need it to make sure I'm not missing anything. So I do need to do it this way originally, no matter what. And then my plan is to then condense it into what the board really needs to see in the future.
Okay, that's totally understandable. I would just,
and I can do that for you, Jenna. I can add the carry forward projects as a separate little list of tables.
that would be
Still have, yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Super. Any other questions? No questions. Okay. I will turn it back over to you to wrap up. Tell us next steps, what to expect.
Yeah, so what will happen next meeting is these budgets will be updated with the 2021 forecast figures. They will change. It's just inevitable. And any other changes the board has resolved to do at yesterday's meeting, or even today following this meeting, will be updated into the budget and re-presented. And at that point, they can be approved or not, but I hope that there's no big changes, because this would be adopted on the March 30th meeting, the regular board meeting on March 30th.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your very clear presentation. This is really, really helpful. Okay, so at this point, would you like a resolution to receive? We've made one motion already, but well, is that what you want, Kristen?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we could have one to receive and subject to anything Director LaFrance wants in that wording.
Okay. I have someone move that we receive this presentation. Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Crompton. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director LaFrance, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. There's verbal is next. For my verbal, I guess I just wanted to share, well, no, actually, sorry, I'm gonna change that. Sorry, this was for a different meeting. Okay, I'm going to skip my chair's verbal. And was there any late business? No. Can I have someone move adjournment of the committee of the whole? Moved by Director Stoner, second by Director Weeb. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now, Kristen, where do we go from here? There's, I don't know if you heard, but I dropped a massive stack of papers and everything is out of order.
Chair, we will go back into the regular board.
Okay.
And we will start at item 16 there, which are the recommendations, of which there is one.
Okay, can I have someone move the recommendations from the committee of the whole? Moved by Director Stoner, seconded by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now could I have someone move that we go into closed? Moved by Director Weeb, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Let's take a 7-minute